Welcome back to Caney Theater Group's local spotlight series. Really excited about today's interview. It's going to be so good. I just treasure this woman so much. She does so much for our theatrical community, and I'm just really excited to interview her. Before we get to that, though, if you are inclined to donate, help Caney Theater Group with their 2021 season. We are asking for donations, and if you are inclined to donate, there is a PayPal link in the comment section here on Facebook. If you are not on Facebook, you're on IGTV or our YouTube channel, or you are on Facebook and you're like, hey, I want to donate later. You can always go to our website, which is ketg.org, and click on Support KETG. Also, while you're there, sign up for our newsletter and take a look at what's coming up. You can also see past interviews from the local Spotlight series on our website, and that's ketg.org. Well, like I said, I'm so excited about this interview, and I just want everyone to welcome Moonyean Field. Hi, Moonyean.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm good.
Yeah, all right. I'm so happy that you're here.
Well, I'm glad to be here.
We're going to start the interview off with the same question that I ask every single person in every interview we've had so far.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's just so personal and wonderful. And that is, what is your theatrical timeline? When did you start? Where did you start? Where are you now? And all the fun stuff in the middle.
Well, I guess I started at Benjamin Phelps Elementary School in Agawam because basically I started out as a singer. So fourth grade, they started pulling people in to be in choruses and picking the singers in the classrooms. And so Mrs. Cunningham, who was the music teacher at the fourth grade, picked me to be in the chorus. So that was the beginning. So I did that. And then in junior high school, Agawam did little musicals. So seventh grade, we were doing The Sorceress Apprentice. And I was like, oh, I didn't know about that. And I was so upset because they had auditions and I didn't know anything about it and I missed them. And it turned out that the music teacher just picked kids that were in chorus anyways to be in the chorus. So I, without auditioning, I got into that show, and well, that's, so I went there, and Agawam High School did Broadway type musicals. I mean, they had a long history at that point of doing full, with 60, 70 kids in them. So, I mean, it was a big deal to get in the musical. So, so when I got up there my freshman year, I, auditioned for that and got into Bye Bye Birdie, which was the first show that we, they had I was one of 4 freshman girls that got into Bye Bye Birdie. So just be in the chorus of that. And so I did four shows, the 4 years I was there. And then I went to UMass, and I started there as a nursing major, and I'm thinking, oh my God, I knew what a time commitment it was to do shows, so the first semester there, I didn't look around for a group or, but
okay.
I went and I went to see the musical that they did, and I'm sitting in the, audience and going, I could be up there with those people. Why don't I sit out here? So I hopped into that and did musicals the whole time I was at UMass. They had a student group there called the Operetta Guild, even though they hadn't done an operetta in probably 20 years at that point. It was in the late 60s when I was a student. And so I worked my way up to being the head of the group, so the business manager.
Right.
And that year, we talked about, why are we calling this the Operetta Guild? This is stupid, So we changed our name to the Music Theater Guild that year. And so I was the last president of the Operetta Guild, because the next president, we had changed the name. Stephen Driscoll was the next president. So he took over and did that. And I continued that because the Operetta Guild, or the Music Theater Guild, and it's still there today. It's now just called the Theater Guild because the music theater and some of the straight play groups joined together, and so it's that same line. It still exists, and they'll take people from the community. Yeah, it's open, like all the 5 colleges. Like we would get people from Smith would come over and audition or whatever. And I was living, after I graduated, I was working in Belchertown. So I was right in the area anyway. And so I continued to I was in company there like 2 years, 3 years after I graduated. So from there, right after I graduated, I kind of looked around and I said, oh, community theater, I should try that, and I went, and there was a group in Wilbraham at that time. Not the Wilbraham United Players was there, but there was a second group. It was just Wilbraham Theater, I don't know. But anyways, they're defunct, they're gone. But so I went down and I auditioned for that, and they were doing Once Upon a Mattress, and which is a show I have a lot of history with. I've done it, I've directed it, I've been in it, I've run lights for it, I've been in it 3 times. So that was my first thing to audition for. And I was cast as Lady Larkin. So I was like, 23 probably at the time. And it was an interesting experience. And, but then I went back and did UMass for a while again. And then I went off to graduate school in Arizona. So that little hiatus, I didn't do much theater when I was in grad school. I was studying rehabilitation counseling with the deaf, and I did some stage managing for a company that was doing simultaneously, some of the characters were deaf and some of the characters were hearing, and, and combining sign language and all that. So I did some stage managing during that couple of years, but I didn't do any performing. And when I moved back home after I finished school and started working, then I started looking around again for, what's in the area? And I was drawn to, at that time, the St. Martha Players, which of course is my home group, and eventually became the Opera House Players. But so back at that time, they were still the St. Martha Players. And I auditioned for Promises, and was cast in that. And that, basically, I did 2 shows with them, moved to, I got a job offer in the Boston area, and so I moved out there for a year, and got connected with the Regal Players. And the Regal Players have—
I've worked there.
Have you?
I have. I did Fiddler on the Roof there.
Oh, wow. So I did an incredible production of Showboat. Oh my God, it was huge. And like one of my friends who had just graduated gotten his master's in design, Stephen Rourke, designed the set. I mean, and like the second act, when it opens up on the fair, and there was a Ferris wheel, and they had rented costumes, all the costumes from New York. I mean, it was a beautiful production. And then I did that, and then I did, I stage managed for them. They used to do a dinner theater during the summer, and they were doing a production of You're a Good Man, Charlie Brown. So I was a stage manager for that. And then I got a job offer back home. So I came back and jumped up. St. Martha's was doing Sound and Music, and they'd already cast it, but they were having a problem filling in those, those adult roles that, that don't have a whole lot to do, So they said, well, we could use, another singer in this. Sure, I'll do that. So I jumped back in there, and then that, from there, I did probably every show for the next 20 years. I think I was in just about every one of them. And I directed a couple. So at that point I was working in Chicopee and Chicopee Comprehensive High School. And so I also became the drama club advisor there. So I did that for about 15 years.
Wow.
And it worked out because St. Martha's, we would just do 2 shows a year. You know, we would do November and May, you know, because you could walk away. We were in the school there. We used there, and so we could use it when we needed it. But, you know, you didn't have to pay. You only paid when you were there. So, you know,
right.
we just did the 2 shows a year. So I would plan my season at school in between those. And then occasionally during that time too, I wandered off on a few times to do, you know, other shows. So I did a couple over at Exit 7. I did, I played Fred in Once Upon a Mattress there. There was another mattress. And I directed mattress at St. Martha's. And I did Into the Woods. I played Jack's mother in Into the Woods there. And I did Nonsense with Encore Players, which was a group that was in Springfield for a lot of years. But that's a good costume story. Anything. They didn't want to put anybody into costuming. And the producer for that show, we were like 2 weeks out to opening. And the producer came in and said, I want you guys to look in your closets and see if you can find costumes.
For nonsense?
Right. I'm like, oh yeah, we all have.
Let me just get my habit.
Matching habits hanging in our closets. And oh my God. And so we went, so I went home and I made one. You know, I made one costume and I came back in the next night with it on and I said, what do you think? And everybody said, oh yeah, that's great. I said, okay, my house next Monday will make the other 4. And so everybody came over to my house and we cut them all out and sewed them, and then we had costumes.
That's insane.
So, but like I said, so I've been with the St. Martha Players, and particularly once we moved back in the early 2003, we did our last performance there. At that point, St. Martha's had the same pastor from 1968 when the group was founded. Through that time. It was the same pastor. And he was at that point in his 80s and retiring. And the new guy that came in, he wasn't really interested in having a group there using their space. And he wanted to make it into classrooms or whatever. So then we started looking around and we found the space in Broadbrook at the house there and rented that for 15 years. So
that's where you got the Opera House Players.
Right. And we changed our name. Once we were there, it didn't make sense to obviously be the St. Martha Players because we weren't at St. Martha's anymore. So we just changed it to the Opera House Players.
And that's the Opera House. That's
right.
What you guys are known as now.
Right. And so we stayed there. So I've been with them, and you know, during that time I started doing some costuming back at St. Martha's. I would like early on when I started working at the school, I got the Proposition 2.5 happened in Massachusetts, and a lot of people lost their jobs in education. And I was laid off for a year. And so I had time on my hands. And so I started helping the customer. And you know, I was just come in and I would either help her find things, or I would sew hems or sew buttons on things. And so I started doing that, and I, you know, started doing it a little bit more and a little bit more, and then I took over it. So I did quite a few. I mean, I would often, if I could find somebody else, oh, hey, yeah, I'll help you, you do it. And I'll just be in the show, and so I don't have to be in it and costume it at the same time. And the 2 that I directed, I got somebody else to costume. But
oh, good.
Quite a few. I still ended up costuming quite a few of them. And then obviously when we went to Broadbrook, then we started doing 4 shows a year. And so I gave up the drama club at that point because I could not, the way my job was going and everything, I just couldn't do all of it. And I costumed pretty often there. And in the last oh, 5 years or so. I think I've costumed just about all but one.
That's crazy.
But so that's been my home group. So I haven't strayed from there. Certainly since we've been in Broadbrook, I've just done all my stuff there.
Now, you're widely known for your costuming. So tell us how you costume a show from the moment you get that script and have that meeting with the creative team to the opening night. Like, how do you figure all that out?
Yeah, well, it does vary because it depends on what the show is. Personally, I mean, I try to, ideally, it'd be great if you had one show and you meet 6 months before you even start the show and get all that stuff out. But when you're doing 4 shows and you're doing all of them, and you're the producer and the costumer, and sometimes in it, and I have done that. Les Mis, I did all 3 jobs. But you don't quite have that luxury. But obviously the first thing is you read it. And I usually try to build a timeline for each character so that I can see where do they have to change, okay, here's the day. Oh, this change, this is another day. And if you're going to do it realistically, and actually give them all of those costumes. Sometimes you can't afford to do that.
Right.
But I try to come up with a spreadsheet of everybody and then, marking off, okay, they're going from this character to this character, or they've got no time. And, you go back to the script and say, oh yeah, let's see, there's 10 lines between when they're in this costume and when they're in that costume, because that has an impact on choose. So, and then meeting with the designers and the set designers, and hopefully you find out what color palettes that they're going to use, and so that you're not, clashing with them. Sometimes it's coming up with a color palette. Sometimes it's based on what you have. Mm-hmm. Like finding that key piece that fits somebody and looks really good on them, and then building other things around it because you want to use that. And then, sometimes you can't find the right costume and you have to make it. When I was doing Hairspray, for example, I had a ton of 50s era, 60s era costumes. And I only had 6 girls that I had to get into dresses, And so I would find 4 that fit this girl and 4 that fit this girl, and then I would put them all together. They didn't match. Like the ones that looked good and, the colors didn't go together. It was like, you gotta be kidding me. I ended up having to make 2 because I could not, even though I had 30 costumes and I only needed 6 to go together, they just did not go together. I just, and I feel it's something that I do well, and I'm not always surprised myself. Sometimes it all gets together, and then I step back and I'm looking at it and go, look at that color's picking up over here from what I did. And I didn't even do it consciously. It's just, I've done it enough times that
right.
I see people who make those kinds of mistakes, and figuring out who has focus. Like you might have a costume that looks absolutely great on somebody, but they're not the focus in that scene, and it's a red costume. And
interesting.
They pull, every time they walk out, they pull your focus. A lot of times you have people bringing in their own stuff, and they'll, how many theater groups have to rely on that, particularly if you're doing something that's fairly present day, and they'll say, I'll go and watch somebody else's show, and I know that that's what they've done. Mm-hmm. And they haven't given them enough guidance, or they haven't edited it enough as the designer to take care of
I
that.
think that's so cool that you actually, that one of the things that you do is that you take a look and see who is the scene about.
Yeah.
And just make sure that costumes don't pull that focus.
Yeah, you have to. You
That's
have
really
to.
cool.
And like red, I find red is a very hard color to use.
Oh yeah.
Um, and the other one, surprisingly, is white.
I could see that.
You know, because of light, and that tends to pull focus too. So those two colors are like hard to put on stages. So, and I have certain colors that I really like, and I usually like, I love purple, so I usually,
I do too.
you know,
I like blues, purple, silver, black.
right,
Those are my
right. And then
colors.
you know, and then you have certain people that want certain colors. You know, certain actresses have their preferences.
So we talked about you finding the design for it, and things that you have to look out for.
Right, and you have to then, you know, you have to research too, and that's the thing I like. I like doing shows that are in a given period that's other than now.
Mm-hmm.
So I usually start with that, and I try to find the right period, and I try to look at what's real, but when you're doing musicals, not everything is real. You know,
Fantastical.
Like Oklahoma. If you're doing, and if you're even doing it traditionally, they didn't have those colors that you want to put in it in real Oklahoma. You know, they were, granted the photographs aren't usually in color, but they're dark colors. I mean, they were out on the farms, and you know, so this isn't a drama. You know, if I were doing a drama, you know, I would want to do that. But so then you have to use your own creativity and say, okay, I know what this is real. This is what the history of would say that you would wear, but this is musical. So I'm going to put these colors in there, and we're going to pop this out, and you know, but I'd like to start with what was real.
Of course.
Then make the choice to not do that, or to, you know, like you're doing a fantasy, like Into the Woods or something, and it's all different periods, or you know, so that you move off into what your vision is. So it changes.
So now, what's your favorite show you've ever costumed?
I really enjoyed Into the Woods. That was one that I really enjoyed, because you had a lot of leeway in creating each storybook. So I tried to make Cinderella's story in a certain period, and Jack and Beatsock was a different period, and that, you know, so that because they were in different, you know, there were different stories. Yeah. So, but then they all went together in terms of color and palette and things, you know, but
sure.
But that was a fun show to do. And in community theater, you have to start with something. You can't build everything. You can't afford to do that. So, and you know, fortunately, I have access to the warehouse and of costumes, and so I can pull a lot of things. But there are times when you just have to build something new. Or in that show, I made some gowns for some of the stepmothers, and Cinderella's, her ball gown we made. And I used wedding gowns, so that you're not cutting and making the whole thing. I took the gowns, I dyed them, I changed the sleeves, or, you know, in the case of Cinderella's, I had taken the whole top off, because the top was really modern, but it had this great, beautiful skirt. So we used the skirt part of it, and we built a bodice to go, you know, a period bodice to go on top of that, and then added extra ribbons and things along the bottom, and ruffles and stuff.
You're thrifty too.
Oh, well, you have
I
to.
love that.
You have to be like
That's true.
have Broadway budgets, you
We
know.
don't got no $14 million.
Right. And like when I did Beauty and the Beast was
Oh,
great fun to do. And I had all the Enchanteds at the warehouse that I could have used, but we had just rented them out to Wilbraham. So Wilbraham United Players, they had used most of those. And we kind of wanted to do our own thing. So we built all new Enchanteds for.
that's awesome.
Luckily, I had a great team of people. I did the Belle's the gown,
Mm-hmm.
and again I started with a wedding gown and dyed it, and then changed the sleeves and added. I had this incredible gold material so I did an half overskirt on top of that. So it was an incredible, beautiful gown. That has been used by other companies since then. But I had for Madam, I had the set designer, because he built the wiring, and I had Christine Summers came in and she covered it and put the actual thing together. I mean, I picked the materials and that.
Right.
It was my thing, but she built that part of it. And I had a designer, Richard Itzak, who came and did Lumiere, because the Lumiere we had was not the right size for we had this little teeny costume, and the guy that was playing it was, bigger guy. So, yeah, so he was like, nah, that's not good for him. So Richard built the whole costume for him. And I had another friend from Wellesley who built the clock guy, Cogsworth. And then Marsha Kelb built the teapot, and Emma Thompson, Emma Connell built her the teapot.
So Chip?
No.
Mrs. Potts.
Mrs. Potts's human dress. So we.
Oh, okay.
So we made the teapot and the human dress out of the same material. So,
it was a team effort.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you can't do a show like that without a really good team. So, I mean, there have been shows in the past that I've been pretty much the whole team, and maybe had a few people that would come in and, help me a little bit with hemming or whatever. Like the last couple of weeks when you've actually got things on stage. I mean, that's the other thing. You think you've got things costumed, and then you start running, and all of a sudden they can't make the costume change, and then you have to rethink, how do you do that? I should have brought the picture from Matilda. They would have, one of the guys had a really fast costume change, and he just wasn't making it. There was just and I had to kind of redesign the whole thing, and I ended up like doing fake shirts that weren't real, just pieces of shirts that you could just slip on, and we finally, but like the first costume when he came out, he was a total mess, and they were taking pictures, so I have this picture of him with under his blue shirt that's underneath sticking out, and it's just a disaster. So sometimes you have to make changes during those last couple of weeks. So it's really like crucial to have a team that you can say, okay, look, you need to go and hem this, or somebody's tripping over their costume, or they're doing a choreography. That's the other thing with this whole, you've got a certain period that looks great, but they can't move in it.
Right.
You're doing things from like the early 1800s, or that have really narrow skirts and things like that, and then you've got choreography, and oh my God, you have to rethink that. That's not going to work, So that's why it's like really important, I think, for a customer to be at rehearsals and to watch. Like I go to choreography rehearsals and watch what they do.
We're running out of time, but I do want to ask you a question because you mentioned a warehouse, a costume warehouse. Can you tell us about The Lady and the Leopard?
Right. Okay, so The Lady and the Leopard is the vision of Dr. Solveig Pfluger. She was a doctor at Bay State Medical Center. She ran a genetics lab there. She was also a geneticist. She was a cat geneticist. She was the geneticist for the International Cat Society.
What?
And she bred these little munchkin cats, and she was just an incredible person. And she had gotten very interested in costuming, and that was her hobby after her other jobs. And I don't know when this woman ever slept. And she amassed over the years just a whole bunch of costumes. And she was doing Ren fairs to make some money and then buy more costumes. And so she was doing that kind of stuff. But it was overrunning her house. So she decided to rent a warehouse. So she found this place in Chicopee, and she rented this warehouse, and she had about 1,000 square feet that in this 5,000 square foot bay that she was renting. Mm-hmm. It became very quickly, and I had met her, and I was starting to help her, and we were working on stuff together. And it became very clear to me that 1,000 square feet, you're never going to get everything in here. You know, she was starting to move stuff in from her house, and every time they'd bring some more in. And then Greg Troklil, who had Chimera costumes, had gone out of business, and he still had a group of stuff that he still had from his business. So she bought all of his stuff and moved it into the warehouse. So it became clear that 1,000 square feet wasn't going to make it. So she bit the bullet and took over the whole building, which then gave her license to go buy more stuff.
Of course.
So when anybody went out of business, she would go to auctions, and then we were making stuff. And so the whole 5,200 square feet is just packed with stuff. We would go to, TDF has these big bag sales where they sell off old costumes. So I've got costumes in there from the Metropolitan Opera Company.
Wow.
There's just some incredible stuff. And her mission was basically to provide some really quality costumes at some pretty inexpensive, because if you go to most costume places, they charge you by the day.
Right.
And, if you're a company like, oh yeah, well, I could pay the $50 for, one day, but hey, I need these for 3 weeks because I have to have a rehearsal in them, and, I can't afford that. And so she just made it her mission to provide this. And then in 2014, she died, and her son inherited the stock of the place. So he technically owns all of that. And I took over as kind of the manager of it. Which is a volunteer position. There's like Halden, who's her son, and neither one of us make any money off of this. We do it totally to pay the rent, which is considerable. It's like $2,200 a month to maintain the stock, or that place to keep all this stuff. And of course, right now we're in very dire straits.
Yeah,
it's been pretty much a word of mouth kind of business. You had to know how to find me. You had to know, how to get a hold of me, or else you couldn't rent anything, because it's all by appointment. It's not like it's open to the public.
Mm-hmm. Well, all you companies out there, all you theater companies out there, if you need costumes,
yeah,
Moonyean.
Right.
Talk to
but
Mooney.
I love doing that part of it too, because, you know, I can help people pick out stuff. And, you know, I always know the really good customers, because, man, I just have to point them and they'll say, well, I'm looking for this. All right, over here, go look over there. And they pull out some of the greatest. Oh man, I forgot we had something like that. That's really
My
cool.
last question for you is the same question that I ask everybody at the end of every interview. And that is, what draws you to live theater, to live performance?
Okay. Well, for me, it's rather than the performance so much is the process. It's that collaboration, that meeting with all these other people and working on this one project to create this beautiful piece. I know some people, they hate the rehearsal process and all, they just want to get there to the performance and let's do it, you know. For me, it's the rehearsal. It's getting there and finding that character and finding it. And I'm an introverted person. I don't, you know, I'm like big parties or I'm in the corner. I'm not, you know, I'm just not. And theater's always been that door for me to meet people. I mean, the people that I was friends with from college, they weren't the people that were sitting in my class, like person next to me in class.
Right.
They were the people I did theater with.
Of course.
Because, you know, after a whole semester of sitting next to somebody, you'd be lucky to know who they are and their name, you know, whereas in a couple of months, you got to know these theater people really well, you know, and they became your real friends. And to this day, the vast majority of my close friends are people that I met through theater. So that's been that avenue for me. And like I said, just, you know, it's a family, you know, so real, you know, there's, yeah. So, I mean, that's what you can go to any town. So like I moved out to Boston and immediately I had, you know, a company, I could find a theater company and, you know, you just jump right back into that. So that's what it is for me.
Well, thank you so much for doing this, Moonyean. I have enjoyed talking to you and just getting to know you a little bit more and to understand just how in-depth costume design is. It's so interesting. And I like we had said earlier, if you are looking for costumes, contact Moonyean. Lady in the Leopard. It's quite the establishment. It is something that we as a theater community need. So thank you so much, Moonyean, for everything.
Thank you.
Have a good night. Thank you.
Bye.
She's so wonderful. Well, thank you so much again for hanging out with us tonight. Join us every Tuesday and Friday on our YouTube channel, IGTV, or Facebook, and just enjoy learning more about the theatrical personalities in our community. So thank you once again, and have a wonderful night.